Sosie, you were so incredible in the movie.
Thank you.
I loved it. It's literally one of my favorite horror movies of the year.
Wow, cool.
I thought it was
That's
so
awesome.
fantastic. Now, I love when horror movies they'll go through the movie and you never really get a name for the creature or the entity that, you know, and it ends up like audiences will name them. So I was just wondering if you had any like creative name ideas for what the monster might end up being called.
Like, yeah, I was just thinking about that actually because, like, you know, that sweater that I wore, like that long brown sweater, we used to call that the monster, like all the time. Like, is she wearing the monster? It's the monster. Everything became like the monster. So we don't have a name for it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what people will say.
I was coming out of the movie thinking of it. I was like, maybe like cavity. I don't know.
Cavity, that's funny. I like that. That's really cute. Funny because people are always like, oh, you have nice teeth, but then every time I go to the dentist, I have like 7 cavities. I'm like, what the I thought I had nice teeth. Apparently not.
I mean, they look nice from here.
They look nice, but just like, don't get in there, then it's really just dark. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm the same way. I totally understand. So
why is that? You're
know.
just predisposed to cavities, I
don't
suppose.
know. Hyperdontia, that could be another one. I don't know if you know.
What's
that's like
that?
too much teeth for one mouth. So
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's sort of what that, yeah.
I don't know what it could be. No, so the movie tackles a lot of interesting themes that I found fascinating. I mean, obviously there's mental illness and there's maybe the trauma from seeing a person commit suicide. How do you feel like the movie paid respect to those themes versus like exploiting them?
I mean, I think that from the very beginning, you're seeing somebody who has experienced or witnessed those things and is also a fully functioning adult human with a job who's like going about her life, not sort of letting it control her. And that is the case, I think, for most people who have experienced trauma, which seems to be most people, right? So I think it's not making it debilitating. You know what I mean? It's like we all have to continue with life no matter what we've experienced. And then this sort of thing makes it so that everything is kind of, you know, shaken up. But like she remains strong and she is persevering through life in spite of it, you know? So I think, Does that make sense?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Well, now that you're basically you're officially a Scream Queen, you know, I think there's no doubt about that when this is over. Yeah, you're going to be a Scream Queen. Would you like to do more horror, or is there another specific genre that you would sort of like to, tap into after this?
I just really like real, uniquely entertaining and like interesting things where characters feel real. So it doesn't like horror. I would do another horror movie. Of course, I feel like I will. Maybe not right away, but there's all kinds of genres that I would like to explore. I mean, like Kyle and I want to do a buddy comedy about 2 exes solving a crime. So there's that. No, but there's a lot of things I want to do. I don't know. But of course, I would, of course, go back to horror one day. Like, it's such a fun, amazing genre.
Yeah. Well, not to bring up your dad, but one of my all-time favorite horror movies is Stir of Echoes. I love that movie.
I've never seen it.
You didn't see Stir of Echoes?
I don't see it.
Oh, my God. I can't believe
but
that.
But it's similar, right? Like, he's kind of going through isolation.
I mean, I don't know if that's weird for you, but you have to watch it. I mean, it literally is one of my favorite horror movies.
Yeah.
Would there be any, discussions about possibly doing something with your dad in that sense of, you guys doing a horror movie together?
Maybe something eventually or soon or eventually something like
I got you. Awesome.
It's possible.
I already told you this last night, but I love the movie. One of my favorite movies of the year. Congratulations on it coming out.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. With horror movies, there's always the inevitable sequels afterwards. You know, it becomes a franchise. Is a sequel something that you would entertain doing, or would you be more interested in passing that off to somebody else and then going and working on a different thing?
You know, for me as a filmmaker, I never want to retread and just do something I've already done again the exact same way. So, you know, in a universe where there could be any potential more story from Smile to Tell, I'd want to make sure it was surprising and different and not what people were expecting after the first one.
Right. So, you know, one thing I really love about the movie are the practical effects, right? We kind of talked about this a little bit last night and about how shoddy, CGI can make some, horror movies feel. Why do you feel like practical effects is so important to a horror film?
I think there's just something really, palpable about a practical effect. When it being there in front of the camera gives the actors something to interact with, and it just has a different gravity, a different weight to it. I think audiences, they can sniff out a bad CG effect if it doesn't quite have the budget or the time, to make it. But when you have a really incredible practical effect, sometimes you get an audience to really question what they're looking at, and for me, that's movie magic.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to say on camera how many movies have been ruined for me because of terrible CGI, but yeah, absolutely. So, all films have their inspiration, right? And this film felt like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it felt like it was inspired by It Follows and The Ring. Were there any other movies that you really loved that you felt inspired you in some way, shape, or form in making this film?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a few movies that were on my mind constantly while I was making it. Certainly like Rosemary's Baby, the feeling of just being gaslit and nobody around you believing you and not being able to trust your own perception of events. Also, like Todd Haynes' Safe, I love the sort of like boiling anxiety and the way it places you in the characters, like stress and sort of like panic attack going down that rabbit hole. And then another movie I was thinking about constantly was Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Cure, which just has this very like nightmarish atmosphere and has this like kind of weird supernatural feel, but there's this investigative angle to it, and like I loved that kind of a film. So those things kind of came together.
Oh, awesome. Well, one thing I love about this movie is that you go the entire movie without knowing the name of the creature or the entity. I love that about it. But, eventually, if it does become like a franchisey thing where people want to see more Smile movies, it'll inevitably get named. So I was just wondering if you guys had a name during production that you called the monster, you referred to it, or anything fun like that.
We had a few different little nicknames for it, but I would actually rather audiences get a chance to sort of name it themselves. I think that's always been a fun thing in culture, where the audience sort of generates the name, and then that makes it into the canon.
I told you already, the cavity. I love the cavity.
That's great. Yeah, that's super.
Or maybe
good.
just hyperdontia, which is where there's too much teeth for one mouth. Don't call it hyperdontia. I'm just playing. But no, that's really cool. So obviously there's so many different themes going on in the movie. You're sort of attacking mental illness and the trauma that comes from watching somebody commit suicide. And I felt like you guys did it very tastefully in a way that didn't exploit that. How difficult of a balancing act was that to do, to make sure that you were paying respect to those themes versus exploiting them?
Yeah, I think it was all about just telling an honest character story and really placing the audience in that character's shoes. I think we're all sort of walking around with all this stuff inside of us, whether it's trauma or history or whatever it is that we're all carrying around, and then we put up walls and we mask ourselves to the world and kind of keep that all inside. And I wanted to sort of explore that and this feeling of the unknown, because I think the unknown is really frightening, and exploring what it might be like to have your mind turning against you, and see if I could get the audience to sort of reconsider how they might perceive somebody who's experiencing something they can't explain.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. I love that. So how, this is just for my own personal, I love that you basically took a celebrated short film and you've turned it into this full-length feature. There's been a couple of instances where people do, but it doesn't happen very often, right? Where somebody will take a short film and turn it into a full-length feature. How daunting is that experience to say, hey, like, we really love this 5 to 10 minute thing that you have. Let's get a full 2 hours of it.
It's enormous. Making short films, for anybody, I made several, and for anybody who's done it, how enormous of an undertaking it is just to make something that's 5 or 10 minutes long. But that just amplifies by a million when you're approaching a feature. Just sort of, it's so unwieldy as a process. But you bet on yourself, and I'm so humbled and grateful that the studio took a chance on me, and I'm really proud of what we did.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Did you already have those ideas kicking around from the short film that you thought, like, I really do have area to like sort of move and expand on here?
Yeah, I think any good short film should exist for its own sake. It shouldn't feel like a commercial for something bigger, right? But when I was in post on Laura Hasn't Slept, there was something about it that kept nagging at me, and this idea for a larger film sort of emerged from that. And when the opportunity came around to pitch a feature, I was really excited because I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
Right. Well, you did a fantastic job. You knocked it out of the park. I loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me.
Of course, I appreciate that.